Hi guys, I'm Mikey Microphone, and the microphone is a metaphor for the fact that you have something beautiful to say, but you need to make the arrangements so that you can be heard. When I wrote Ways We Enjoy Magic Cards, I knew that I wanted to be able to update the book regularly, and that would alleviate my any hesitation to release it early and often. And so I created a platform for editing and publishing that will allow me to create updates and still save old copies of the book. And I did it in a way so that if a certain chapter doesn't change, I can just keep the data and refer to it using foreign keys. I don't need to copy the whole book each time I release a new edition. So copying the data isn't a problem usually, or at least in this case it's not, but it is something that would give people anxiety. Just a minor feeling of like, oh, I want this to be worth it. I want it to be worth the trouble. I don't want to release a new edition of my book every day. And it might be kind of a irrational attitude, but I wouldn't want people to feel like, oh, I'm going to stash all my edits in another file, and then when I'm ready to publish, I'll edit every chapter and then push the update. And I think when I put it that way, you can sympathize. You know people who will stash their edits in another file and then put them into the system because they have this feeling, they have this emotion, they have this anxious feeling. I don't want to screw things up. I don't want to muddle the data. So I don't think I was really feeling that way, but I did see a good way to structure books this way. And I saw another benefit to doing this, which is that you could have a chapter that appears in multiple books. Like if you wrote a book about sideboarding, you could have a chapter about sideboarding for modern. If you then wrote another book about deck building, you could include the same chapter about sideboarding for modern. And with the hierarchy that I've created, you could reuse paragraphs as well as chapters. You could reuse sections, right? So each chapter can have multiple sections. Each section can have multiple paragraphs, and each paragraph can have multiple citations. And with the kind of loose referential structure that I've created, it's possible for any one of those things to actually be included in multiple different books. So this is kind of overkill for the business that I have now, but in the future, I think it will give people hopefully another motivation to write for me because they know that their work can actually be packaged up in multiple different ways for people who want a short book, people who want a longer edition of the same book, and things like that. So I'll show you the way that I have these associations set. And I guess I'll start by showing you some of the data. So like I said, I have books. Each book has many editions. Each edition has many chapters. So from edition to edition, you could add a chapter or reorder the chapters, something like that. Each chapter can have many sections, and each section can have many paragraphs. So some of my chapters don't really have multiple sections. The way that I do that is I just create one section and I can leave it untitled, but it still acts as a container for the paragraphs that are in that chapter. And then each paragraph can have many citations. And that is one of the strengths that the online edition of the book has that the PDF currently does not. So The citations are something, they're one of the tools that I haven't fully explored yet. There's only a few citations currently in this edition that I have out. And then I have, so each one of those tables just basically includes data. This doesn't say which book it's in, it just has the actual content. And then even here for paragraphs, there is just simply an ID number and the text of the paragraph. So the way that I tell the system which paragraphs are in which book and which chapter they're in, what order they're in, is with this table called Table of Contents. And what this has is a book ID, an edition ID, a chapter ID, and then optionally a section ID, a paragraph ID, and a citation ID. So you can see that there's this little cascading pattern where like there's some nulls here, and that shows you that this table of content is representing the fact that this chapter is in this edition. And this one is representing the fact that this paragraph is in this section. And then there's an ordering that says what order the paragraphs within that section should appear. So this was a cool experiment, and so far it seems to be working really well. I actually extended on this system to make it so that I could do revision tracking. And every time I edited a paragraph, it would create an entirely new edition, so I could actually walk back through time to see every change that was made. And that was another kind of concession to the emotions of authorship, where you're like, this is pretty good, but I kind of want to change it, but I might want to change it back. I wanted to have kind of complete undo button capabilities. And I do keep every edition of a paragraph. If you change the text, then your old text will be saved in a different field. Your old text will be saved in a different record. But I redid my thinking there because I found that when I wanted to reorder the paragraphs within a section, it was complex because copying all of the table of contents and then trying to figure out which order to place the paragraph in after that, it created a burden which I wasn't easily able to solve, which is that I had to copy all the other paragraphs before I copied that one so that I would be able to know what to put in the ordering field. So I walked back that strategy, and now there's not as many copies of the TOC data being made, which I count that as a victory for the emotions, so that people will not hesitate to make edits. It also is a little more efficient because copying thousands of rows of data took a moment. And it created a lot of redundant data in the database, which is not a problem, but it makes it a little harder to do debugging when you're actually peering into the database like I am right now. So that's just a recap of some of the steps that I took to get to where I am now. So the interesting thing, the challenge about structuring things in this loosely coupled way is that when I want to edit a paragraph, I have to tell the system which chapter I'm editing it in, because that paragraph could appear in multiple different books. It could appear in different chapters within the same book. So I have to tell it all the superseding IDs that it needs to locate in order to figure out where to place the freshly edited version of this paragraph. And I was able to do that by creating a nested hierarchy of divs. So this was kind of a coding experiment that I did. So this paragraph is contained within this div, which is for section 74, and that is contained within this div, which is for chapter 33, and that is contained within this div, which is for edition 6. So on this page, I'm actually only looking at one chapter, but I have this nested hierarchy of div with data. And everything that has the class div with data also has a data attribute, which is the ID of the container. And so I then have this JavaScript, which is actually written in CoffeeScript, that let's see, it looks through all the containing elements that have the class div with data, and it grabs the data from each one, and then it puts all of that data for each one. It puts all that data into this object called location data, and then it passes that in let's see, attach form to okay, so this looks like it's making a GET request. Oh, so when this is submitted, vertices 1, vertices 2. Okay, so when I am editing a paragraph, what that's doing is appending it to the section. And so vertices 1 would be section, vertices 2 is paragraph, and then append is the method within the controller that handles that action. And anyway, what it was able to do was use that div with data nested hierarchy to put all of that information about where this text should actually appear. It creates a new version of the paragraph so that the other places where that paragraph appears can retain the existing text. So there was kind of a lot of bookkeeping to do, pun not intended. And some of these links, if you look down at the very bottom of the screen, you'll see that this contains a book ID, a chapter ID, and an edition ID. This contains a book ID, a chapter ID, and edition ID. This contains all three as well. And this contains 4. So just to tell you about my nomenclature here, promote would mean that I'm moving this section up above this one. So for this paragraph, I can promote this one, but this one I can't promote because there's nothing above it in this section. Delay would mean I'm moving this paragraph into the following section. So you'll see for this one down here, I can't delay it because there's no section beyond that one in this chapter. And these tools work really well. Editing the book in this interface has been really pleasant, but there's a couple weaknesses. One is that when I incorporate new editing tools, there is all that bookkeeping to do where I have to just plug the extant IDs into all these links. The other is that sometimes when I make an edit, I have to then refresh the page in order for all of the tools to be present and ready. So I didn't yet implement a cancel button for these edits, so in order to get out of this editing view, I'm going to just refresh the page right now. And refreshing is fine. It's not a, I don't really consider it a weakness of the interface. Again, this is something that I mostly want to provide for other authors who will not be as familiar with the inner workings here. I don't want them to feel like they have to refresh after every edit, even though the system is basically fast enough to make that a functional mode, functional workflow. I don't want them to feel like they have to do that. I want them to just get straight to the point. And with the management of like the ordering in particular and delaying a paragraph into the following section, like not all of my chapters have section headings. So when I decide to add section headings, I create them, they start at the bottom, and then I have to move the paragraphs into the sections. And so sometimes there's a little bit of ambiguity about whether all the data is synced up so that I can continue with the editing. So sometimes it feels like I have to refresh it after doing that. So, and then I guess to illustrate this a little bit, these are the links, this little icon, that's what I use for adding a new piece of data. So this would be to add a paragraph. This would be to add a citation. So what I'm going to do now is add another section. I'm going to call it what was it? Drafting. Okay, so ad hoc repacks. And then now I don't yet have any of the tools for this, so I'm going to refresh. Now I can compose a paragraph and say to simulate fresh packs, you could gather cards from a set and group them into packs with 1 rare, 3 uncommons, and 10 commons. You could either try to hide or forget which cards are there, or you could try to remember and base your strategy on this. This technique resembles a common form of cube, which has 1 of each mythic and rare. Each uncommon, 3 of each common. I don't think that's the actual formula for that kind of cube, but that's why I can edit it later. And then I can say a really fun way to leverage this really fun way to experience this might be to remove all the best bombs so that the cards are on a flatter power level, and the only way to win is with superior strategy. Okay. And again, like there's no way for me to dismiss this form once I've started appending stuff, so the normal thing to do would just be to refresh. So these are all like minor interface issues that I would like to clear up so that I can push this platform out and start to approach other authors with maximum confidence and be like, this is how you should write your book, and I should sell it for you. So when I was planning this video, my expectation was that I would build on the technique of ascertaining the container IDs from the div with data system. That when I click edit, this edit link would grab those IDs from the divs that are containing it. And if this paragraph happened to move into a different section, like the one on the section about cube, then it wouldn't need to rewrite these links because those links wouldn't contain the section ID until they were clicked. So that was my plan, to do some JavaScript refactoring. But what I realized is that the table of content record already has the all the IDs that I need to do all this bookkeeping on the back end. And rather than, so you can see this controller has a lot of code, and that's part of what I'm trying to address here. Now again, all the code works, and I can get a lot of leverage by basically copying and pasting this code into other controllers, so I can do the same mutations on sections and chapters as I do on paragraphs. But it's messy enough that it kind of called out to me to be like, find a better solution. So rather than grabbing the table of content this way, in this 200 character line of code where I specify first the book ID, then the edition ID, then the chapter ID, then the section ID, and then the paragraph ID, I can just send in the table of content ID, and that record will give me all of those: book ID, edition ID, chapter ID, section ID, paragraph ID. So that is my plan for how I'm going to refactor this. And then hopefully I will be able to kind of complete the editing interface, make it so that refreshes are not part of the workflow, and then make a quick video about how to use this book editing platform and reach out to some other authors. Okay. So which link should I start with? Let's see. Perhaps with remove. Yeah, I think my plan is to refactor all four of them. Remove, edit, promote, and delay. And then there's another one, which is append, which is the form that you see after you click edit. So append is the one that's currently using the div with data nesting. And the others just have explicit IDs that are included in the links when they're generated. I'll show you how those links are generated. So I guess I'll start from the top down. Show you how all the different pieces of this interface are generated. So I start with the edit template, and that basically has a couple links for previous chapter, next chapter, and promote the chapter, meaning reorder the chapter. Then it renders this partial, which is for the template for actually editing the chapter. So this partial is here, and this starts with the chapter title, chapter subtitle. So I'll show you what that prints out. Here's the chapter title and the subtitle. Then below that, this is grabbing the table of contents. Okay, so this is an interesting piece to discuss. I'll go through some more of the template, show you those links. Actually, the links are right here in the template. I expected them to be in a helper, but. So, table of contents that are section-ish, which means they have a section ID but no paragraph ID. So they're specifying the position of a section, not something within the section. Table of contents that are section-ish for this chapter in this edition. And then I pass them in each here. I grab the section from the table of content, and then I print out its heading and its subheading. So most of my sections do not have subheadings, but that is part of my editing platform. And then I put out these links. So this one, it looks if there is a previous one, the table of content ordering. That's why I put that in there. The promote is put in there if there's a previous one. Then there's the edit. Then there is the remove. So those you can see right here for the section, edit, section, remove. And then for this one, promote, edit, and remove, because it does a previous thing. And then I go through the table of contents again. I look for the ones that are paragraph-ish. And I pass them each in here. I grab the paragraph, create a div with data for that paragraph, spit out the paragraph text, and then I have the controls for the paragraph, which is delay, promote, edit, remove. And you'll notice, like, I don't have a delay control for sections currently because, again, like, I've built this interface progressively in the order that I was using the tools. I haven't yet had the need to move a section from one chapter into another. So that control is not yet part of the interface for sections, and I believe it's also not yet part of the controller for sections. So yeah, there is no delay here. And this one has a little less code because with sections I don't have, there's just one less ID that I have to specify for each one of these table of content lookups. Yeah, this controller looks okay. But I want it to be better. I would like it if I could actually make it so that these things like promote and delay could possibly even be pulled out of these controllers so that I could put them into a separate module that could be included in multiple controllers, and then those entities would inherit that behavior. Basically, they would share it, because the editing and positioning process for citations, paragraphs, sections, and chapters is pretty similar. And the code doesn't necessarily need to know which one it's handling, as long as there is enough implicit data for it to ascertain what it's doing. So that's kind of on my radar. I'm not needing to get that generalized, but I might as well try to learn how to do a new type of coding. So that way, I might also be able to enhance the behavior of my system more easily. Like, for example, when one of the things that I want to deliver to my customers is kind of a change log. Like, if there's a new edition of a book they like, they might, they want to know which parts were changed. They don't want to have to read the whole book again and like scrutinize it for the updates. So if I wanted to do logging where it's like, oh, okay, this paragraph was changed, this section was changed, this citation was added. If I want to do change logging, it might be easier for me to put that into a module one time rather than putting it into each of those controllers 4 times. So that's a longer term goal. Probably won't get there in this video. You'll have to subscribe. Okay, so yeah, let's start with remove. That seems like it might be the easiest place to do this. So I'm looking at the paragraphs controller. I'll close some of the other ones, and I'll look at destroy. So destroy is the terminology that's used on the controller side. Table of content, so it's searching out a table of content. That's what it's destroying. It's not actually erasing the paragraph, it's just erasing the table of content, which establishes the presence of that paragraph in that section. And then it's grabbing subsequent paragraphs and reordering them. So like if I destroy paragraph 4, then it will take paragraph 5 and 6 and make them into 4 and 5. So in order to rewrite this, all I will basically have to do is replace this line with a table of content.find params table of content ID. And then I will have to replace this with I can either ascertain these IDs from the table of content that I'm going to fetch on line 58, or I can write a method to get a subsequent table of content, which will work for any of the table of content types, whether it's paragraph-ish or section-ish or chapter-ish. So I might go ahead and try to do both those things at the same time. So I'm going to look at the code that creates the destroy link for paragraphs, and that's right here. And I already have the table of content that's establishing that paragraph's position in my scope in this block. Initially, I had this loop just going through the paragraphs, and printing the data out from those records. But then when I started to have the reordering interface and I wanted to omit the promote button if it wasn't relevant and omit the delay button if it wasn't relevant, then that's when I switched to this technique of, rather than looping through the paragraphs, I loop through the table of contents and get the paragraph from the table of content on the next line. So I'm basically looping through, but I have two objects in each iteration of the loop rather than just one. And so I have this object, and I can just cut out all these IDs and say table of content ID is this. And I'll say dot ID for now. I don't think I actually need to do that. Yeah, I'll just cut it out. See if that works. Okay, I'll take a look at, okay, so I can see right at the bottom of my browser that the table of content ID is actually an ID there. So Rails helpers are looking at this active record object and knowing that I want to actually pass its ID rather than any of its other data. And then on the controller side, I can say tape, oops, that's the wrong action. I'll go to destroy here. Go table of content dot find params table of content ID. Okay. And then we'll do this one step at a time. So first we'll test it out by grabbing these IDs from the first fetched table of content. Okay. Okay. So I'm noticing something really awesome here. So this query that I tagged onto the end of that list of IDs is designed to, it's a greater than. So in order to do certain logical or mathematical operations in the database, you can do greater than, less than, you can do not equals, not in. Those are often done by kind of typing out some SQL and then embedding the value of variables in the string that is SQL. I prefer to use Ruby rather than SQL. And so the way to do that for a greater than operation is to do this somewhat stodgy syntax where first you grab the table name from from AREL, which is a library called active relation, something like that. Then you say greater than, and then you pass in the value there. And using this Ruby gives you more flexibility, I think, and it there's some long-term benefits, I guess, is the succinct way to say that for the purposes of today. So what I'm grabbing here subsequent is not just a single table of content record. It could be multiple. And so this query is going to get everything that matches all those IDs and has a greater. Okay, so I think kind of what I want to do is say you don't have to spend money to draft as long as you have 100 cards or so. Here's a way that you can use those. Okay, so I'll refresh to get my tools. Then I'll promote that until it's the first. And then let's see if I remove that. Okay, let's see what happens. So I'm going to go to my server log, and this is a trick that I learned way back in the day. I'm just going to put some space in here so that I'll know how to find that position in the log really easily. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and click remove without refreshing. Nah, I'll refresh first, just to be sure. I'll remove, and let's see what the server log did. Okay. Oh, I refreshed first, so I annihilated the blank space that I created. Look at all this loading that it has to do to render that paragraph. That's not that much. Okay, so there is a little space that the server log inserts between each request. So start a delete. First it loaded a paragraph, then it loaded the scribe, that's me, my admin account as it were, my editor account, my scribe account. Then it loaded the table of content, it deleted it, selected table of contents, update, update, update. So the ordering became 3, the ordering became 2, the ordering became 1. Okay, so it looks like it worked perfectly. Then it rendered the destroy template. I'll show you guys what that looks like. So it grabs the paragraph from the table of content, and then it takes about 1.111 seconds to get it out of the way. And so this appears to have worked perfectly. And this is now in position 1, now in position 2, now in position 3. And I guess I can also take a peek at the data to show you that. So we're in section 79. So I'll look here where section ID equals 79. Hit Command-Shift-E to execute this. And so yeah, the paragraphs are in order 1, 2, 3. There's no 2, 3, 4. There's no missing gaps there. So that delete worked just the way I want. Okay, so let's see about refactoring. Well, I guess what we can do is kind of freeze frame our current progress. We edited the link. We edited the logic on those 2 lines of code. And I can say delete paragraph by TOC reference. Okay, now subsequent. Do I want to make a method where I get all the subsequent guys? I was thinking the method where I get the very next subsequent one would be pretty reusable. Do I care about getting all the subsequent ones? I think I still do, because This line of code is just too long. Obviously, it doesn't really matter how long the line is, but it's just kind of a clue that your code could be better. I want to use this for when I'm deleting stuff to reorder them. And I can piggyback on top of the multiple subsequent to get the unitary subsequent. So seems viable. So I'll go to table of content, the model. Okay. So the first thing to determine okay, so the table of contents that are subsequent to this will have equivalent IDs in every row except for basically the outermost row that is populated. So so for something that doesn't have a paragraph ID but does have a section ID, the subsequent ones will have the same chapter ID, edition ID, and book ID. For something that has paragraph ID but no citation ID, the subsequent ones will have the same. And you'll see here, these are all the same for all these paragraphs. And the orderings happen to be in sequence here because this basically was written in sequence and not edited since, but in order to make a query, I'm going to have all these be equivalent to the one that I'm starting with. I'm going to have all these be equivalent to the one that I'm starting with. And I'm going to have these be varying. So subsequent. So I guess this might be a little roundabout, but I'm gonna try doing this. So I'm gonna write a method that shows the content that this table of content is locating. If it is a citation, if it has a citation, then we'll return the citation. If it doesn't, then we'll go to the right side of this or statement. Paragraph, or section, or chapter, or edition. Okay, and then this seems to make sense to me. So I'll say content.class.name._+ ID. So underscore is a method that makes all capital letters downcase, and it puts an underscore in between words that are capitalized. There aren't any two-word class names here, but it's just as a matter of flexibility. It's better to use underscore than just to use downcase. And I can go ahead and test those methods here in the console. I'll say TOC. Okay. So that one has a paragraph ID but no citation ID, and it correctly noticed that its content was a paragraph and correctly spelled out the name of the attribute, which is specified in that paragraph. So I can start by attributes. So content attributes. I can make a hash. Book ID. I probably. Let me think. Can the same edition be multiple books? Okay, yeah. So the same edition can be multiple books, which basically means you're selling the same book under multiple different titles. You could have one which is Ways to Learn Magic, and another is Magic, the best back to school, after school, Magic, the best back to school tool. And another is Magic, your after school break time, your 20-minute break between homework sessions. So I will include the book ID here. And since this is being called from within the context of a single table of content, it has a book ID. That's why this is just a bare word here, a method. Edition ID is edition ID. Chapter ID is chapter ID. Section ID is section ID. Paragraph ID is paragraph ID. Citation ID is citation ID. So making this dynamic would have certain benefits. Like I'm thinking about, when I was editing my book, I realized that I kind of wanted a level between edition and chapter, so I can have like the kind of a section of the book that was about deck building, for example. It could have multiple chapters, but they were kind of contained under this thing. If I want to add a level to the hierarchy in the future, I'll have to revisit this code. The reason I'm not doing it dynamically now is because I think it's more likely that I will add attributes to this model that are, well, okay, so I could just make this into its own model. In fact, I kind of feel like I recall already doing that. Anyway, that's enough discussion of that. The model does have here toc.attributes. It will already spit out this stuff, but you see it also has other attributes like created at, updated at, flags, ordering, and ID. And so I could start with all the attributes and then exclude those, but I think I'm more likely to add more of those than I am to not do that. So for now, I'm just going to be explicit and name the 6 levels of table of contents hierarchy right here. Hopefully I won't have to repeat that over and over, which is the process I'm trying to avoid by doing this refactor. So content attributes is that, and then I'm going to omit the one which is the content identifier of this particular TOC. So what I've done here is made a string, and then here I've identified my keys with symbols. So I'll just make this one into a symbol. And then self.class.where, and then I can pass content attributes accept content identifier where, and then I will just hijack this query to get the greater than logic. And then for position, it will simply be the ordering of the table of content that I'm operating from. So, okay. I can test that out in the console. Take a look at so here is a paragraph that has multiple subsequent elements. The table of content containing it is 214. I'm going to reload my code since I just wrote a new method. TOC equals table of content.find 214. TOC.subsequent. Okay. And then let's see if I can pretty print that. Okay, so yeah. Great, so you can see that in each of these rows, the section ID is 31, 24, 1, citation ID is nil, but the paragraph IDs themselves are changing. Okay, so now let's try to grab one that is near the end of that section, so it only has a couple subsequent items. And so this one will be 6 out of 8, so I'll look at that. It's 219. So grab 219. And that one there, yep, it has this one and this one. So now I can go to the controller. And since this code is so nice and neat, I actually can feel pretty good about squishing these 2 lines onto 1 line. And then we can test out our code again. So I can remove this paragraph. Okay, so I didn't get any result there, which makes me think that there was probably, okay, great. Couldn't find table of content with that ID. Okay. Two, 6, 1, 2. Okay, interesting. So this goes right to 2, 6, 1, 1. Oh, there's 2, 6, 1, 2 right there. How interesting. Table of content.find 2, 6, 1, 2. Couldn't find it. Okay. Refresh this. Run this query again. And indeed it is gone. Okay. I'll look at the remove links again. 13, 12, 11. see if I refresh this. Okay, so it did. Okay, so I think what happened was I kind of preempted it. I might have clicked it multiple times before it rendered the animated update. Okay, that again didn't give me undefined method subsequent for class. Okay, that makes more sense. So when I ran the code the first time, it successfully did these 3 lines and removed the paragraph. But then this threw an error, so it stopped and it didn't render the animation. And the reason is because I need to be calling subsequent on the object, not on the class. So that is now destroyed. And this now has no subsequent data, so I'll add a little more here. You could also exclude counter spells, land destruction, discard spells, or whatever you think is the least fun mechanic for your family. And I'll say in order to add some fairness to the repacks, you can sort your cards by rarity into upside down piles and then assemble the packs while shuffling the piles. And strictly speaking, you don't even need to include a rare in each pack. Draft formats are designed to work that way, but it's up to you. They're your cards now. Okay. Then I'll refresh this. I will remove this. Then I'll take a look at data. Okay, so the ordering looks to be 5, 4, and 3. Do I have a bug? So this is paragraph 515. Yep, that is the one there. Okay, so that's sitting on ordering 3. So it looks like there may be a bug that it surfaces when I do multiple changes to a paragraph like this. I'm gonna try. Okay, so this. Yeah. Okay, so the sequence of changes that I did led to data being out of sync. These should be ordered 1, 2, 3, but instead they're ordered 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to possibly review the tape and see what I did that might have caused that. And in the next video, we can try to get that sorted out. So guys, remember to go to wayswemage.com. There's a ton of awesome information there. I just added some new lists of cards. You can see the banned list, and you can see every card at once. You don't have to hover or click on anything to see where the cards are, what the cards are. So it's a great new way to leverage this list format that I've created. Just the other half of this app, besides the editing tool, is the list management tool. So check that out, and I'll be back in a little while.